Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. It is Tuesday, February 17th. I'm just seeing if I can't get this up on Rumble. On X. I've had a hard time trying to get this appearing in my feed on X. And so I don't know if I can do it. All right, welcome to the episode today. So there is some breaking news regarding this hockey shooting. Another trans shooter opens up on his family in the stands of a hockey game where his son was playing. Oh my gosh. Out of control, obviously. And I want to go over again the Democratic hopefuls, presidential hopefuls for 2028, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Gavin Newsom, Hillary Clinton, I guess she's still a presidential hopeful. We're at the Munich Security Conference in Germany, and they made fools of themselves. Hillary less so, but she was still challenged and failed. That was interesting to see. And let's see what we have going on. I'm trying to get like I said, I mentioned previously that my live stream was appearing on X, and now it doesn't appear on my feed. And so I had a way to go ahead and make that. It says it's public. And I'm trying to get it on my feed. I thought I had a way to do it. I can't do it. So I'm sorry to get you into that. We got a lot of headlines, over 32 headlines to get through today. I just want to urge you to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. And without further ado, let's get into the news. There's a lot to get through today, considering the SAVE Act, which Chip Roy apparently has figured out a way to not get rid of the filibuster and still push it through the Senate. So we're going to look at that as well. So let's read the news. All right, we're going to start with Fox News. Are we? Or are we not? Hold on one second. Yes, we are going to start out with Fox News. AOC mocked for absolute train wreck weekend on global stage, made a fool out of herself. Governor Whitmer was widely mocked for saying AOC was much more steeped in foreign policy than her. She attempted to mock Secretary Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez attempted to mock Secretary of State Marco Rubio for saying that the U.S. cowboy culture originated in Spain. It did. It's called gaucho culture. And it came up actually through South America, Brazil, Chile, etc., through Mexico into the United States. But his gaucho culture came out of Spain. My favorite part was when he said that American cowboys came from Spain. Ocasio-Cortez said, laughing, I believe that Mexico's and the descendants of African enslaved peoples would like to have a word on that, whatever the fuck that means. African Americans didn't have anything to do with cowboy culture. Matt Whitlock, a GOP strategist, was calling her an absolute train wreck for talking Nazis, Mexico, and Spain. The word salad heard around the world on Taiwan. And then, of course, it goes on more, says, you tell me you know nothing about history without saying that you know nothing about history, according to Ted Cruz. New York Post AOC lampooned for claiming Venezuela is below the equator while trying to show off foreign policy chops. The article goes on to say that the far left New York City Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is being widely mocked for her erroneously claiming that Venezuela is below the equator while trying to show off her foreign policy chops in Germany. And there's a map. What a freaking idiot. So just, it works for me. So if you know where Ecuador is, so on the Pacific Ocean in South America, north, on the northern part of the continent, but Ecuador is named for being on the equator. So Ecuador is south of Venezuela, which is at the top on the Caribbean Ocean, Gulf of Mexico, at the top of South America. So Colombia, Suriname, Guyana, all at the top there. You know, you had the Isthmus of Panama going off Colombia as well. Just a little geography there. Obviously, AOC doesn't know very much about anything. She was given the crash course on socialism when she disappeared for a year, like most of the Manchurian candidates are. They disappear. They're steeped in what they need to know about politics, but not steeped in history, whatever. She was a bartender. She's really a know-nothing. She acts like she knows something, and she's always indignant about the folks living below the poverty line or indigent or what have you. Let's move on to the next article. Fox News, AOC's Munich stumbles draw criticism from liberal critics admitting comments were not great. Even liberal and moderate critics claimed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez comments were one of the bigger mistakes in her political career. And what I'm going to try to do is play a clip here. Let's see if we can do this.
Marco Rubio's speech was a pure appeal to Western culture. My favorite part was when he said that American cowboys came from Spain.
I thought they came from Winnetou, but
I believe the Mexicans and descendants of African enslaved peoples would like to have a word on that.
Would and should.
Oh, there's more. Hold on, I don't know if there's more here. There is another video I wanted to play. I think it's from the same thing.
It is not a remark on who Maduro was as a leader. He canceled elections. He was an anti-democratic leader. That doesn't mean that we can kidnap a head of state and engage in acts of war just because the nation is below the equator. And it is not.
All right, that went fairly well. But we're going to move on with the headlines because we have tons to get through today. If I can. Yeah, I played that clip for her. Political analysts, Mark Halpern, also said, I think giving AOC a slot may go down in the history as one of the bigger mistakes she's ever made if she wants to be president. He added, it takes a major screw up for the New York Times to put in their story about AOC that she had, I think they said it was a stumble or something. It was indeed a really bad stumble. We're going to stay with the news and keep rolling along here. Like I said, there's a lot to get through, and I did start a little bit late today. Just on a personal note, my wife was like, I'm going in work. She's working late. So she goes, I'm going to go into work late. So she got up late and didn't bother to tell me that she was going to do that last night. So I got up late, and every 15 minutes, it takes me a couple hours to get to go through the news and prepare. So doing okay so far, so let's keep rolling here. Fox News again, Clinton faces backlash from the left after calling mass immigration disruptive. The strategist argued Democrats should not play into the debate on who is the biggest deporter. So they're flip-flopping. To be honest, Hillary Clinton is more of a moderate. She's a neocon. So she was a neoconservative, which is neoconservative is not a conservative at all. It's a liberal, but is more interested in foreign diplomacy. So kind of evening out the shortcomings usually of Democrats don't know much about foreign policy, as much as the Republicans do. She also is an idiot, but again, she was considered being tone deaf. And I played that clip yesterday of the the Czech prime minister, Peter, I forget his name though, but was calmly put to her that the destructive policies of social policies of liberal-minded, progressive-minded folks is actually damaging to the cohesion of nation states, et cetera, et cetera. She didn't have much to say about that. She actually freaked out and raised her voice, which was interesting to see. More from Fox News. Cruz calls Newsom historically illiterate, posts clown emoji after governor fires back. Ted Cruz called dyslexic person illiterate in a new low, even for him, according to Newsom. Newsom said this. So Gavin Newsom says he's dyslexic, but Cruz called him historically illiterate, which is different than being illiterate. Like, I could be dyslexic at times. When I start moving a little fast, I jump ahead, and sometimes I put things that are supposed to be at the end in the beginning, but that's only when I'm pressed and rushed. But I'll go on to the story. Because you apparently have no idea, Eisenhower federalized the National Guard to stop governors from defying federal law. Specifically on September 23rd, 1957, President Eisenhower issued Executive Order 10730, federalizing the Arkansas National Guard and ordering U.S. Army troops, the 101st Airborne, to Little Rock, Arkansas. This action broke the blockade of Democratic Governor Orville Faubus, allowing the Little Rock Nine to desegregate Central High School. It's just a basic history that Gavin Newsom didn't know. He called you historically illiterate, Clay Travis wrote, which means you don't know basic history. You not having ever heard of the phrase or knowing what it means makes you a moron. Indeed, it does. Historically literate doesn't mean anything about being literate. It just means you don't know anything about history. You haven't learned history, which most people should know. I think I spent way too much time on history and geography, particularly geography when I was a kid. My dad constantly broke out the atlases. If you don't know what those are, they're big books with maps. And every time I asked him where something was, he would just show me, or I asked him something about history, he would point to the encyclopedia, which back then were actual books. PJ Media, illegal alien kills someone while fleeing ICE. We know this happens. Federal judge issued Guatemalan criminal Oscar Vasquez Lopez a final order of removal in 2024, but of course the Biden administration did not act upon it. Therefore, on February 16th, that's yesterday, ICE finally identified and tried to arrest Lopez in Savannah, Georgia. But while driving away, Lopez made an illegal move in his vehicle, an illegal U-turn, and killed an innocent civilian driver. This vehicular homicide is an absolute tragedy, and deadly consequences of politicians and the media constantly demonizing ICE officers and encouraging those who are here illegally to resist arrest, which is a felony, said the Department of Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin. The police said during the operation, officers observed Vasquez Lopez enter a vehicle and then attempted a traffic stop. Vasquez Lopez initially complied, but then fled the scene, making a reckless U-turn and running a red light, colliding into a civilian vehicle. The civilian driver sustained fatal injuries and was pronounced deceased on the scene. Vasquez Lopez is in custody at the hospital with minor injuries and is being charged with Chatham County Police Department with vehicular homicide. Like I said, if this person was taken into custody originally on his deportation order and held for ICE with or asked for a retainer, this would never have happened. The fact is, federal laws have to be enforced. They have the agents out there to do exactly that. And obviously, people need to be detained. Now, the important part of this, briefly, is that motor vehicles are a deadly weapon, as proved in this case. So when someone speeds away, they are a danger to not only other police officers or federal agents, but also to the general public. Because when they speed away like that, when they're resisting arrest, like Renee Good was resisting arrest when she sped away, they could be a danger to the general public. That's why police officers and agents can use deadly force to stop them. Post-millennial anti-ICE group promotes jury nullification training for Minneapolis agitators. We will learn about jury nullification or the people's pardon, how it's been used, ways it could stem authoritarian overreach, and how we could use it today. I'm actually a proponent of jury nullification, but let's be clear, little morons in Minneapolis, illegal aliens are never going to have a jury trial before deportation. So you're wasting your time there. Now, whether or not you want to have jury nullification for obvious criminals, you could try that, be my guest. But you would have to convince a jury to nullify. Or if you're on a jury, you could try to nullify, but to what cost? At what cost? It'll be, if you get criminals released back into the community, you're posing a safety risk to that community. PJ Media thanks Jacob Fry. It's Fry. His sanctuary city policy slams Minneapolis with a $200 million cost. Indeed, how has this happened? He had just done what the other mayors have done, which is allow his police department to keep the peace while federal law enforcement does its sworn duty. Most likely, 2 people wouldn't have died. Indeed, and most likely, Frey's city would not have suffered economic damage to the tune of $200 million. According to a local TV station in Minneapolis, Frey cites $81 billion in lost revenue for small businesses, $47 million in lost wages for people who are afraid to leave their home. Why would they be afraid? Because ICE was demonized, snatching people off streets. $38 million in unrealized construction value and $4.7 million so far in hotel cancellations extending through the summer. Illegal immigration costs money. Illegal immigration costs money. Illegal immigration costs money. Illegal immigration costs money. If you let the people in, you have to pay for enforcement to get them out. So it's better not to let them in. Not to mention, if they're let in, they're a drain on social services. Mostly, not particularly, their children going to school, because we're not going to ask for kids' proof of citizenship. But I saw it in my own community before, when I was working in media, that class sizes ballooned under Biden. And there were many classes that had English as a second language. 30 plus students, all not literate in English. So plus, and then the teachers would have to spend more time with them, et cetera, et cetera. All right, I'm stayed too long on that. PJ Media, Nick Shirley just took a look at California voter rolls, and oh my God, in his new 23-minute video in San Diego and Orange counties, the most conservative areas in California surely casts a bright light on how Californians are registered to vote as illegal addresses at illegal addresses such as office spaces, storage units, P.O. boxes through the state. These are illegal residences. Indeed, California voter rolls are so leaky that multiple 125 plus year olds have been voting for years in the state. These people need to be recorded in the Guinness Book of World Records for the oldest voters ever. And voter impersonation, not what we typically think of as voter fraud, is really the problem in the Golden State. Nick Shirley posted on X, California is a breeding ground for voter fraud in America as millions of people vote with no ID, month-long election processes, inaccurate voting rolls, dead people caught voting, even a dog successfully registered to vote, and voter verification is all based, et cetera, on signature verification, which they don't pursue. We saw the pattern where duplicated ballots take the names of persons, for example, Linda Payne, and just adjust it in the duplicate Linda S. Payne, then the birthday, they adjust it, and then they keep the place where they live, they keep the address the same, but they have material sent to a post office box or a house or anywhere because it's legal to send that anywhere. They're talking about ballots. What we noted is 25 of the 200 sets of duplicates in 2016. We noted 25 of them and the duplicator signed their own name. Normally, they would just sign the voter's name, Linda Payne. This time they signed their own name, and that was on the ballot as well. What they're talking about is basically this voter integrity pursuant did an experiment with her name, Linda Payne, and all they do is did different variations of the name and kept the address the same. And then when the people turned in those ballots, they didn't even write in Linda Payne. They just wrote in their own name. Dumb. Fox News, DHS shutdown drags into fourth day as Senate Democrats block funding over ICE reforms. Partial government shutdown enters fourth day as negotiations over Homeland Security funding remain deadlocked. There's a way to pursue this. And we're going to get into that. I missed a headline here that was supposed to be. Let's just go to it now. Just the news, Trump administration finds greater success in immigration cases at appellate level. We don't even have to, do we have text on that? Yeah. Those legal battles intensify, however, the administration is finding greater success at the appellate level, particularly in conservative-leaning districts such as the 5th. Recent ruling there has revived the president's mass detention strategy, underscoring the uneven legal terrain facing the White House as Supreme Court looms as the ultimate arbiter. And that's important because, like the article said, it shows that when you're in a Democratic district with these activist judges, they often rule on a stay, which isn't really a ruling. They just rule that it has to stop for now so they could look into the matter further. But they know if they look into the matter further, as the appellate court does, it'll be ruled in the favor of the administration. All right, DHS shutdown drags on. We went to that one already. Washington Times, Schumer embraced ID laws to counter fraud in the 1990s, but now calls voter ID Jim Crow 2.0. He's a liar. They're all liars. Video has emerged of Senate Democrat leader Charles E. Schumer in 1996 talking about the importance of ID checks to prevent welfare fraud by illegal immigrants. He goes on to say, let's admit the truth. Everywhere people go, they're asked for a Social Security card. In fact, one way to prove you're a bona fide person who can have a job is to ask for a driver's license and a Social Security card. But not now, not for voting, Chuck Schumer. You see, the SAVE Act will kill the Democrats. They still have redistricting in their supermajority states, but realistically, it's going to get rid of mail-in ballots, which is the main avenue for fraud that they're exploiting. But also all the other avenues of fraud they exploit to stay in power, because they don't have much of an agenda. And with the Jacob Fry thing, you find out that the Democrats always stick the taxpayer with the bill. They have these outlandish ideas that sound wonderful, but then when the bill comes due, they just hand it over to you, the taxpayer. All right, this is a good article. The Federalist exclusive Chip Roy lays out how Senate can vote on SAVE Act without nuking the filibuster. We can move the legislation under current rules without nuking the filibuster. Roy explains is that Republicans who have either co-sponsored or publicly supported the legislation show up and present a live quorum. This is the important part of the rules here. It would force Democrats to talk nonstop, to delay a vote at just 51 votes rather than the typical 60 threshold filibuster. The commonly accepted 60-vote filibuster threshold to shut off debate is not the only way to force a vote in the Senate. The majority can force opposing senators to speak. That's the Republicans. Roy said Thune could proceed to the Save America Act with a simple majority vote as soon as he chooses. Under the current practice, he could call it up, call a majority vote, debate it for a while, and proceed to a 60-vote cloture vote to shut off debate. It would fail. Republicans would shrug and say, we tried. We need to elect more Republicans. But that's not what you do. This is what we call a fake or zombie filibuster, Roy said. There's no real speaking, just a failure to get 60 votes to shut off debate and then default to a quorum call, no business, rather than having 51 senators show up to call the question at a simple majority. And that's what Chip Roy is suggesting. There are existing Senate rules that allow a present majority, 51 senators, you would have to sit through the talking to seek a vote on the SAVE Act. Democrats, the minority, would try to run a filibuster to stop the vote. But as Roy points out, if Republicans stick together and the minority exhaust their opportunities to speak in opposition or give up, a final vote on the passage of the bill occurs automatically at a majority threshold. That is if they're present. Roy said Republicans would need to be disciplined and table each amendment and enforce the two-speech rule in order to force an actual vote on the Save America Act. We would move this legislation under current rules without nuking the filibuster. And then we're going to move on to the Federalist, what the Wall Street Journal gets wrong about the talking filibuster, which is very important here. So Kimberly Strassel, you might see her on Fox all the time. She's always there in some of these panel talks. She's not stupid, but she's not that particularly bright. And this is the point here. Kimberly Strassel recently opined in the Wall Street Journal about the hot air of the talking filibuster strategy currently being considered by Senate Republicans as a way of passing the Save America Act, a bill that would mandate voter ID in federal elections, require proof of citizenship for registering to vote, and make states purge non-citizens from their voter rolls, and, of course, end voter mail-in ballots. The Senate rules provide two ways to break a filibuster. The first is the mechanical way by evoking cloture, which we just talked about, the Senate's term for ending debate, which requires 60 votes. The second, which has existed within the state's rules since its inception, is by making senators talk, the talking filibuster. Talking filibuster is a strategy that first and foremost imposes a physical and psychological cost of the obstruction on filibustering senators. Second is forcing a public political process that has implications for those who oppose the bill. In other words, it doesn't allow them to hide behind a single vote. If Democrats want to oppose securing the vote from the interference of non-citizens, they should have explained why at length and in public. Strassel has provided several reasons for opposing the strategy challenges she calls false promises and huge problems. Democrats get two speeches apiece, each of unlimited length. This is not true. The Save America Act is coming over the House in a procedural means, which is known as a message. The vote to move on to a bill when it is packaged this way is privilege, meaning the vote is a simple majority vote and no debate is allowed. Also, she says Democrats can easily take turns eating, sleeping, and flying home during this marathon. Again, not true. Because she says all GOP, by contrast, need to maintain almost all their members on the floor at all times. 51 Republicans would not have to sit on the floor, and requiring them to sit on the floor for hours at a time would merely be filibuster theater. Republicans simply need to respond to live quorum calls. The only person with the power to put in a live quorum call when senators must come to the floor and register their presence to vote is Republican Majority Leader John Thune. She also says Schumer could also move to adjourn. That's not true. Any senator can move to adjourn, but simply moving to adjourn does nothing. The motion has to pass. Motions to adjourn are considered at a simple majority without debate. Assuming a majority of Republicans would vote against a Democrat motion to adjourn, it will fail. She also says, indeed, any new questions or a point of order, sparks another round of speeches. This is also not true. Any new question, an amendment, for example, proposed by the Democrats could be tabled by the Republicans with no debate at all. Indeed, any new question or point, and then she goes, tabling a motion is a motion that kills the underlying question, if you know anything about Robert's rules. What's left of the top priority in 2026 for the left? Blocking entirely the GOP agenda. A talking filibuster provides the Democrats with a pain-free, headline-friendly way of taking on the Senate. Democrats would not be blocking the entire Republican agenda, the author here writes. They would be blocking a legislation designed to stop illegal aliens from voting in federal elections, an issue that is overwhelmingly popular with the public. Making Democrats do this is entire point of the exercise, indeed. Then she goes on. The only way to get the end game on the SAVE Act, the purpose of this exercise was to let Democrats have their amendments. Nope. Republicans need to be prepared to table or kill the Democratic amendments, even if they're on issue some Republicans agree with, such as overturning President Trump's tariffs. This is called strategic voting, and senators do it all the time. In any reconciliation bill, for example, amendments are offered that are subsequently determined to be fatal or corrosive to the privilege of the bill. And if you've been with us so far, you'd know what that is. That is, if adopted, they would no longer allow a reconciliation bill to pass in 51 votes. In a Republican majority, all the senators vote against those amendments, even when they agree with the substance of the amendment, to protect the privilege of the bill. She goes on, Republicans could vote to change the rules in numerous ways that restrict the minority's ability to obstruct with talking filibuster environment. Republicans should not change the Senate rules, the author writes, or use the nuclear option that's getting rid of the filibuster. Strassel suggests that the only way the GOP can use a talking filibuster to pass a clean SAVE Act is to strip Democrats of the opposing party rights. That's their filibuster rights. That's not true. Republican supporters of the talking filibuster acts as if simply changing the mechanics of the filibuster, returning to the talking version, will magically allow them to jam through what they want. It won't. And the author says here, the talking filibuster is not a magical strategy, but it is a strategy. If Democrats are going to block a bill that requires voter ID and blocks illegal aliens from voters, Republicans have two choices. They can ignore the bill and do nothing, or they can hold the Democrats accountable. A talking filibuster is the latter. Talking filibuster, she goes on to write, supporters are posturing as fighters, those finally willing to slay the zombie filibuster and force Democrats to work for their opposition. That's not how it would work, so they have an obligation to lay out their endgame. Demanding an airtight, guaranteed result before bringing a bill to the floor began roughly 20 years ago and is an aberration of the modern Senate. For 200 years before that, Senate leaders would bring bills to the floor with a degree of uncertainty. They never do that anymore. They don't want to waste their time. And the momentum created by the debate, the amendments, the exhaustion, and the negotiation usually, but not always, resulted in the passage of a bill. Because there's amendments and reconciliation, etc. Not the reconciliation between the houses, but you know what I mean. Bringing a bill to the floor when you already have the outcome is not fighting, leading, or even legislating, it's just scheduling. And then finally, the extremely good reason the Senate Republicans are keeping the filibuster is because they recognize that they will be the minority again, potentially under Democratic president, and that the filibuster will be essential in stopping gun control, insane taxes, open borders, and a packed Supreme Court. And then the author goes on to say, keeping the filibuster is a very good thing, both for the Senate and the country. What makes the Senate the world's most powerful deliberative body is its tradition of open debate and amendment. The talking filibuster is not a threat to the filibuster. It is the filibuster. And I just went through that. I know that was lengthy because you have to understand how procedure works, Robert's rules, and how can you object and points of order, and making motions, et cetera, et cetera. Real Clear Politics, virtually all countries support voter ID laws, so why the filibuster? Exactly. The Democrats also argue that such requirements would disenfranchise Hispanic voters, yet Mexico, all 12 South American countries, and Spain require government-issued voter IDs to vote. Brazil is not Hispanic, it's Portuguese. So, as a point of order. All of these countries have lower per capita incomes than the United States. If citizens in those nations can obtain the necessary identification to vote, why would American Hispanics and blacks be unable to do the same? Indeed, while 83% of American adults support requiring government-issued photo identification to vote, support is also strong among the very groups Democrats claim it would harm. 82% of Hispanics and 76% of blacks favor the requirement. Just the news, Democrats in North Carolina suffer heavy voter registration losses. Why is that? Amid decreases overall by both major parties, the block of independent voter registrations in North Carolina grew by more than 2,000 in the past 7 days. Since January 17th, the Democratic bloc has also lost 3,134, according to analysis by Center Square and Public Records published by the State Board of Elections. It's a steady erosion for the party that claimed 47.6% of more than 5 million registrants on January 1st, 2004, while Republicans were at 34.4% and independents at 17.7%. The total number dropped. 470 Republicans went back to 1,260, and Democrats were reduced to 1,320. Nobody likes the Democrats. Don't forget that this administration has two prominent Democrats, former Democrats, in the administration, RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, at very high positions. One is head of HHS. The other one is director of national security, national intelligence. Excuse me. On to the Epstein things. We got a little bit of time. I would sort of like to figure out here, though, how I can get my live broadcast posted onto my feed. That doesn't really, it offers me something here. You just have to bear with me. Yeah, it's not in this one. Oh, there it is. All right, let me see if I can't do this. Hold on. All right, I figured out a way to do it. I figured it out. There's a little button there. If it isn't up, it's going to be up now. Sorry about that delay. It's just another, like, if you don't think I'm under attack, I'm under attack. My views are under attack. Every time I try to go publish, I have some success because it stopped publishing to X after a banner live stream where I had the most views on X that I ever had during the live stream. And then the very next thing wouldn't publish to my feed. So I think I figured out a way. I was able to get in through the back end to the producer All right, moving on. Washington Post, the Epstein files have brought a wave of resignations and investigations. If you haven't known, Peter Attia, physician and longevity expert, has resigned. Sarah Ferguson, you know this. Charity founded by Sarah Ferguson, the former Duchess of York, is shut down. Brad Karp resigned as longtime chairman of the law firm Paul, Weiss, and Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison. Miroslav Lajak, a former president of the UN General Assembly, resigned from his role of national security advisor to Slovakia's prime minister. Jack Lang, former French cultural minister, are facing investigation involving laundering of abrogated tax fraud proceeds. Inquiry comes in response to an investigation by a French independent news outlet and his close ties to Epstein. George Mitchell, a former U.S. senator who represented Maine as a Democrat before serving as President Bill Clinton's envoy to Northern Ireland, is mentioned more than 300 times. The U.S.-Ireland Alliance also announced in February that its board of directors have unanimously agreed that its George Mitchell Scholarship Program should no longer bear the senator's name. David A. Ross, an influential figure in contemporary art world, resigned from his position, the chair of the master's degree program in art at the School of Visual Arts in New York. I went there. Joanna Rubinstein, a former chair of Sweden's UN HCR fundraising foundation for the United Nations Refugee Agency, resigned after recently unsealed documents revealed that she visited Epstein on his private island. Steve Tisch, former National Football League, said it would review communications between Tisch, who owns the New York Giants, and Epstein following the latest documents. Thomas Pritzker, this is the Wall Street Journal, named in Epstein files, retires as Hyatt executive chairman. Reuters, New Mexico approves comprehensive probe of Epstein's Zorro Ranch. That's good news as well because that was problematic. Particularly problematic for New Mexico because New Mexico is sort of a liberal state and no investigation was ever done of the ranch ever. And so we don't have a lot of information there. Even though I guess the FBI went in there, we didn't get a lot of what was going on there. And so now finally New Mexico is launching their own investigation, which it should have done a long time ago. Just the news, top elites losing power and position over Epstein fallout. There's more names. So they talk briefly here about that people are lamenting that not a lot of action is taken against the people in the Epstein files, but it has. It hasn't stopped other countries and private sector from tearing down their own implicated elites. The most clear example is perhaps former Prince Andrew, Duke of York. Bill Sullivan, the chairman and CEO of DP World. Dubai government announced the appointment of a new CEO and chairman. Peter Mandelson and Morgan McSweeney, both involved in Keir Starmer's. One was his chief of staff, Morgan McSweeney. And the other one, he had to resign because he recommended Mandelson to his post. And Mandelson actually passed on classified information to Epstein. Mona Juul, Norway in particular, has seen a multitude of high-level officials face charges, resign, or lose their position over the Epstein issue. And if you didn't know much about what was going on here, is, and nothing against the Scandinavians, but they have a very liberal view of sex. So even sex with minors or young girls or other perversions, they don't seem to care too much about, and that's probably why this is. Thorbjørn Jagland, the former prime minister of Norway, was charged with aggravated corruption last week in connection with a criminal probe over his Epstein ties. Americans, Catherine Rumler, you've heard a lot about her, chief legal officer for the U.S.-based multinational investment bank, should be multinational investment bank, Goldman Sachs. She's out. And she was actually, I believe, with the State Department as well. He had a government position. Casey Wasserman, a top Hollywood talent agent, was selling his business after communications with convicted Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell were exposed. Labor Secretary Alex Acosta resigned in 2019 as a result of his role in the U.S. Attorney in Florida in the 2008 plea deal for Epstein. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick to admit that he did visit Epstein private island in 2012. The thing is with Lutnick, whether you like him or not, doesn't matter. Now you see, he's a very good friend of Trump's. So now you see why Trump was trying to delay the release because it outed Lutnick. And we surmised this very early that there are people, donors, friends of Trump that are in there. And that's why he wanted to delay the release, because he probably was like, yeah, release it all. And then Lutnick came up to him and go, I'm in there, dude. Former President Bill Clinton and Bill Clinton and Hillary will testify at the end of the month. And that's what I believe is the reasoning behind the Nancy Guthrie thing. I think it has to do with the Epstein files. Savannah Guthrie, by the way, had victims on her show and allowed them to talk freely and supported them. So I think that's one of the reasons that her family was targeted. And it's the ease of the target, obviously, where it was. And I believe professionals were hired to kidnap her and kill her and to create a disappearance that could suck up the news cycle. I mean, only time will tell. But I have the same feeling I had with the Malaysia flight when it disappeared. When things disappear, you're kind of like, I don't think we're ever going to see that again. There's more news, though. Fox News, California school board member temporarily banned from the school after a clash with principal over ICE protests. Gabe Medina faces a 4-1 vote from the colleagues following his heated altercation over student ICE protest participation at Paola Valley High School. And I'm going to not spend too much time on this because it wasn't really clear at first what he did. And apparently he was arguing with the principal who insisted that the students who left campus would have their vehicles towed. And I guess this guy was pro-ICE protests. And we're going to get to more of this in just a minute. The board said school officials cannot encourage students to leave campus and took issue with Medina's characterization of the district's handling of the student protest. It's not clear here I have to rail against Fox here. It's not clear where the principal stood and where Medina, who's a board member, stood on this issue. The board said school officials cannot encourage students to leave campus. So the principal was encouraging students to leave campus, but why would the principal then threaten to tow vehicles? You know, if the students didn't go to the protest, it was very unclear. And so whoever's job it was should have, Medina said in an Instagram video that he confronted Wilson about him allegedly threatening to tow students' vehicles for participating in the protests. Yeah, it's not clear. You can't, and we're going to see in a minute, you can't encourage students to leave campus in the middle of a school day. That's truancy, technically against the law. All right, I just heard something. And since I'm upstairs with headphones on, when I hear like voices downstairs, I don't have my pistol with me. Something close by. Close enough. Close enough, unless they burst in the door right now. Wall Street Journal, Anderson Cooper to leave CBS News, 60 Minutes, longtime correspondent who is also CNN anchor and host, wants to spend more time with his family. Not true. He just doesn't want to put up with Barry Weiss because he has an agenda as a progressive. And the progressive journalists with agendas don't want to put up with Barry Weiss trying to make their reports more hold on a second here. Did I go over that article already, or is it just vanished? I have to see something here. I had a post-millennial article on a guy who, or maybe I'm confused, maybe I covered it yesterday. A guy, all my post-millennial articles are gone. Yeah, sometimes I just don't know what happened there. There was a post-millennial article on a guy who confronted the school board and said, you can't, he had to go. I think I covered it yesterday. You can't encourage my kid to leave campus. And then the dad had to go and get his kid from the protest. So the school was in direct violation like it is here. You can't encourage kids to leave campus. Especially, and you can't have kids leave campus without telling the parents. That's the whole point of field trip permission slips. All right, we're going back to a big article here that this just broke the other day. Surprise, surprise, another trans shooter. New York Post, Rhode Island hockey shooter Robert Dorgan threatened to go berserk in trans rights rant day before mass shooting. Robert Dorgan, who also identified as Roberta Esposito, of course, killed himself after opening fire at the Pawtucket ice rink where his son was playing on Monday afternoon, less than a week after another transgender gunman shot up a school in one of Canada's most deadly shootings. Yeah, so these people are mentally ill. I don't care if people make fun of you for being transsexual or transgender. You can't go shooting people. People have the right to talk and criticize you and make fun of you. Making fun of people is not against the law. And so this guy who's visibly a man, look at the photo here, he's visibly a man. And if somebody refers to him as a man and not a ma'am, there's no reason for him to be upset. He should be understanding. But he's obviously very confused, and there'll be more on this recently. There'll be more on this coming up. I hear shit downstairs. Hold on one second. All right, Wall Street Journal, RFK Jr.'s next overhaul, America's baby formula guidelines. Administration is expected to begin unveiling Operation Stork Speed this spring, but is unlikely to act on calls to remove seed oils. Sorry about that. I'm not worried, but I hear people talking. And if there are people downstairs, I want to be ready. Moving on with the news, we've got a couple minutes left. Wall Street Journal, Goldman Sachs plans to scrap DEI criteria from its board, race, sexual orientation, and other DEI factors will no longer be taken into account when the board's governance committees identifies new potential directors. This is article number 25, so we still have about 7 more to go, so let's move through them. More from the Wall Street Journal. Micron is spending $200 billion, that's with a B, $200 billion to break the AI memory bottleneck. For decades, memory chips were low margin commodity products. Now the industry can't make enough to satisfy the data center's hunger. I have to check my the surveillance. There's nobody there. Good. Fox News. Grieving parents demand changes after 26-year-old son euthanized under controversial law. Margaret Marcilla says doctors helped her son Keanu, who suffered from diabetes and blindness, to meet criteria for MAID in Canada despite history of mental illness. So that's what we're having now. Whenever you legalize something as controversial and serious as state-assisted euthanasia, this is what happens. You have mentally ill people requesting it and then being put to death. But if you're a social welfare state, less people you're saving money that way. It's like Logan's Run. If you want to know more from the article here, Keanu Vafayan was euthanized on December 30th, 2025 in British Columbia. His family says he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 4 and began struggling with mental health after a car accident at 17. His mother, Margaret Macia of Ontario, said his depression was often seasonal, yet he became obsessed with MAID after losing vision in one eye in 2022. So he could still get around. He wasn't completely debilitated. He just lost vision in one eye. In 2021, eligibility for MAID was expanded to include applicants with grievous and irremediable conditions whose deaths are not reasonably foreseeable. Crazy stuff. More headlines. Zero hedge. Germany's climate policy has moved from politics to the courts, and the economy is paying the price. If you don't know what happens here, that climate policy is socialism, masked in environmentalism. It is basically the social credit score. It's providing substance to a social credit score, which means if any of your activity is seen as detrimental to the earth, your social credit score could get demerits. Very, very dangerous. That's why we need to get rid of the climate policy and be environmentalist, but not have it hijacked by socialists who want to turn it into some sort of scheme to browbeat and control the citizenry. South China Morning Post, Iran fires missiles. Khamenei threatens to sink U.S. warship as nuclear talks start. As the talks began, local media announced that Iran had fired 5 missiles towards the Strait of Hormuz. So if you know anything about your geography, the Persian Gulf is closed in toward its opening to the Arabian Sea by the Strait of Hormuz, which is its heights over the Strait of Hormuz are part of Iran. And all along the Straits of Hormuz, it's like a kill box. So if you have surface to sea missiles, which they have there, pointedly made from China, is you could literally sink any warships that are in the Persian Gulf and particularly sailing through the Strait of Hormuz. You could bottleneck the Strait of Hormuz by sinking ships in that shallow strait, et cetera, et cetera. It's very, very dangerous. So if they're already threatening to do that, that's really their only recourse. And it's very deadly there for that area for U.S. warships. If any U.S. warship there was sink, that would be the end of the regime in Iran. We might not put boots on the ground there, but they would suffer sustained aerial and missile bombardment from the United States in perpetuity. And I'm not for that. I'm not for the escalation, by the way. Zero hedge. China debt model creates danger of stagnation. So if you didn't know what was happening there, the latest social financing figures from China show an economy that is increasingly relying on government debt while private demand for credit remains weak. The people in China know what's happening. And so, although the regime is not on the ropes, their economy has to be propped up by the government. The strength of the Chinese technological sector and exporting companies gives enough room for leverage. However, behind the weak private sector credit demand lies an evident economic slowdown. Thank you, President Trump. More on green ideology, a force for African oppression. If you didn't know this, I've talked about this for years. And basically, the anatomy of despair, what it is extreme poverty is not an abstraction in Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa now accounts for about 67% of global population living in extreme poverty, up sharply from a few decades ago. Now, what you have to understand is when groups like the UN and other groups talk about development, they're actually block development. And that's the problem in Africa. They're blocking development and keeping people in poverty. Why they want to do that? Because they want to have them be victimized by other peoples who want to extract resources. Diamond, gold, whatever. Okay, so Africa is desperate for an aggressive blueprint for expansion that unleashes all assets. The continent brims with untapped minerals, arable lands, and youthful labor forces, but unlocking them requires energy, abundant, affordable, and reliable. History suggests that no region has escaped poverty without prioritizing growth above all, deploying local strength to fuel factories, farms, and cities. But from the 1980s onward, per capita gross domestic product in much of Asia surged relative to sub-Saharan Africa. Asian economies, led by China and India, have lifted hundreds of millions out of squalor. They did it by embracing industrialization and dense, reliable energy requiring to power it, mostly with coal. I think this is the last article up here. Ayatollah to Trump, U.S. warships. This was supposed to be paired with the other one. Ayatollah to Trump, U.S. warships can be sent to the bottom of the sea as second rounds of talks end. I don't hold much faith for those talks. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. I think I did get the show up to X. Let's see, where are we? Hour and 3 minutes. We went through 36 headlines. I should have counted down more. I was really worried about getting through. So some of them are pretty lengthy, especially with understanding the rules of the filibuster, etc. Going over the SAVE Act and the filibuster in general, because that's the cornerstone of what's going to happen there. And that we can indeed get the SAVE Act passed if the GOP are cohesive and diligent in their response. Again, thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel. I'm here every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m., live stream on Rumble and associated platforms. Stay tuned tonight, possibly for another edition. I think it's episode 136 of Tuesdays with Perry. Join us. We usually live stream at 9:15. I will not have a episode tomorrow morning. I've got to go to a medical examination of sorts. Not that serious. It's nothing serious. So once in a while, you have to have people take care of things. So I won't have an episode tomorrow. I will return on Thursday. Excuse me, I'll turn on Thursday. So join me then. Don't forget, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. Stay hip to the trick. I will see you either tonight for Tuesdays with Perry or Thursday morning. Respect.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Less than 3% of you people read books.